you doing, everyone? Today I want to talk a little bit for Rocket Summer 2026. I have been keeping an eye on the various videos for Rocket Summer. I'm not a co-host, I'm not really actively involved, but I do like classic science fiction, and I did want to read a few things for it. I didn't read any novels, but I did read some stories. Now, at the end of last month, as a kind of way to ring in the event, I contributed a small piece of video, a short review, Gareth's video at Book Songs and Other Magic. He put together a video compilation of many booktubers, including myself and himself, and several others talking about nominating a story that they recommend people read. It's a very cool video. Mine's probably the least interesting part out of that whole video, but you can check out my review of Exploration Team there, as well as many other contributions from other people, other good booktubers, and lots of cool stories there. You couldn't go wrong with any of the ones that are recommended in that video. I'll have the link down below. That collection that I first read Exploration Team in is in the good old stuff. Now, I don't have the actual physical book of this. I only have a Kindle, as you can see the Kindle version here. I'll put the actual color cover of the book up on screen. I need to get a hold of an actual physical copy of this because it is just a really great anthology of classic science fiction stories. And it was edited by Gardner Dozois. I believe that's how you say his name, Dozois, D-O-Z-O-I-S. And Gardner Dozois has been involved with many anthologies and many editions of books that he's put together. And he knows his way around a science fiction story. And he wanted to really focus on kind of a widescreen adventure sci-fi that also had really good writing. So he pulled out a whole bunch of stories. I believe there's, what do we got? I believe there's 17 stories in here. And when I say stories, most of these are novelettes. So the ones that I'm going to talk about today are. Now, I wanted to try to read my way through this whole volume. I've read several other stories in this volume in the past, but I only had time really to go through and reread Exploration Team again for that video contribution, that snippet that I contributed to Gareth's compilation video. And then I also have since read this month, in July, 3 other novelettes in this anthology. Let's talk a little bit about the anthology. Gardner Dozois goes into a long kind of explanation of what he's talking about when he says the good old stuff in his introduction, lengthy introduction to this book. It's a really good introduction, really funny and interesting. And he really goes to town to explain his terms. You know, he was cutting out, he still had a whole ton of stories that he puts in the recommended reading section at the end of this anthology that he couldn't find space for in this actual anthology. And he also talks about his criteria for selection, how they have to have a real sense of wonder, real sense of adventure, as well as moving the genre forward, and also high quality of prose were his standards particularly. And he starts off this book with the Rull. Now, the Rull was by A.E. van Vogt, and it first appeared in the March 1946 issue of Astounding Science Fiction magazine. What's cool about this story is we get throws us right into the action right away. There's this kind of explorer, I guess you could say, or scientist, Earth scientist called Jameson, who's on this planet, this remote planet, and he's sitting on this huge, kind of the edge of this huge cliff when he sees another ship from the Rull come in, and he ends up running to his ship and using his kind of ship's blasters to knock this ship out of commission, and it crashes. And basically we have a kind of Robinson Crusoe on Mars kind of situation almost, where the Jameson and this high-ranking officer of the Rull are playing a cat and mouse game with each other through the rest of the story to see who wins, with kind of this long-time war between humans and the Rull. The Rull, or I guess I get the impression of some kind of a reptilian / tentacled sort of race, but they think that they're the best race in the universe. They're the only race, and all other races should be wiped out because they don't have the same level of technology or intelligence. And so they've been kind of fighting a kind of back and forth, very dangerous war with the humans as the humans expand into the territory that the Rull are going into. They've been battling back and forth, and neither side really knows a lot about the other. They have studied the others, but anyway, it's quite a lot of detail. It's not just a strict action story. There's a whole lot of thought and philosophy and kind of depiction of the Rull's society and mindset. Basically, we get Jameson's point of view as he's trying to use his, innate human cleverness to outwit the Rull and the Rull captain, this high-level, really high-ranking officer, as it turns out, who probably shouldn't have been poking around in that area, but ends up there, which works out well in the long run, and for the way the story goes. But apparently, the Rull have some way of kind of hypnotizing humans to kind of lead them into traps to lead to their death. But they're also, the Rull, very powerful, very strong, but they need a lot of fuel, a lot of food. And when this Rull's ship crashed, its Indian engines had a radiation leak and damaged all the food supply. So the Rull is in desperate need of food, and Jameson's trying to use that to his advantage and kind of trying to program the Rull in his own way. It's a really interesting cat and mouse back and forth game, and there's a kind of a third wheel introduced into this when we realize that Jameson has some kind of alien intelligence, invisible alien intelligence cohabiting his body, which pays off really well in the ending of this is also. Anyway, very interesting, cool story. It's not just a straight, most dangerous game, stalking each other and escaping sort of story, although it is that too, but it also has a lot of intelligence to it. Van Vogt crafts this alien kind of culture for the Rull and their hierarchy and how they look at humans and how they think, kind of. He does a good job of getting into this kind of alien mindset, and of course flips back and forth with Jameson, our human hero, who's trying to find a way to switch or turn the tide of war in humanity's favor. Very interesting story, and it kicks off this collection very well. And each of these stories, each author gets a multi-page. It's not just like a little Otto Penzler or other anthology style where they give a couple paragraphs about the author, which those are usually fine and work well. But Gardner Dozois goes into multiple pages about each of these authors and their works and their kind of position or influence in the development of classic science fiction. Later, Dozois edited an anthology, kind of a sequel anthology called The Good New Stuff, which focused on things from stories from the 70s, 80s, 90s. I think it's published. Both of these were published in the 90s, if I remember right. The Good Old Stuff this collection was published in 1998, and I believe The Good New Stuff was shortly thereafter. So obviously not going into the 21st century for fiction, but the covering kind of the late 40s up through the late 60s, I think, for this first volume, maybe into the 70s a little bit. The last story by James Tiptree Jr., who is actually, of course, Dr. Alice Sheldon. That was published in 1971, apparently. So 46 through 71, a 25-year period, and I think basically another 25-year period from the maybe early mid-70s up to the late 90s, middle-late 90s for the second edition. And the Good New Stuff is full of really good stuff, but this is the collection that really fits Rocket Summer and the kind of date limits that its founder, Michael K. Vaughan, imposed, kind of up to the late 60s. And I didn't read anything past the 50s, really, for this. Now, the next story, the second story, I also read this month, and that's called The Second Night of Summer by James Schmitz. And this was a really cool story. It reminded me a little bit and feel of a Clifford D. Simak story, in that it's got a rural setting on this kind of, colony world called Noorhut. And it opens kind of from the point of view of this kid named Grimp. It's like a 7-year-old boy, and he's excited at the coming of summer, and he lives in this kind of agrarian society on this planet, and everyone's kind of excited and has consternation about the increased appearance of these weird baubles of lights, which are actually probes from an alien invading species. They're coming in, and of course the residents of Nurhut, these farmers, this farming community, the humans there, they have no idea what is making these lights. There's some superstition about it, etc. But the real main character of this is a woman called Grandma Wanatel, and Grimp happens to be really excited because Grandma Wanatel and her kind of, well, she's like a traveling kind of medicine woman, or kind of someone who is almost like a gypsy that comes to town and sells medicaments and various things, and she's looked at a little askance by the community. She comes in every summer, and Grimp and her are fast friends, and she has this kind of almost dinosaur sauropod looking kind of reptile creature that pulls her wagon. And of course it turns out that this Grandma Wanatel is not just an old lady selling goods. She is an agent for the Terran Empire that's kind of keeping an eye on this planet, which happens to be, Nurhut happens to be her own planet, and that she's from originally. But she travels around apparently and deals with incursions by this invading alien species, alien race that kind of has a big machine that when they're very cautious, and they look where they're going to. When they're scoping out a planet, they'll take years to do it, and then when they think the time is right, they'll bring in this big, massive kind of glass-like huge machine that can spread the creatures. They look like kind of floating woolly carpet, bat-like things, and they'll basically vampire their way across humanity and feed on them. But this machine will spread them across an entire planet, and when that happens, the only way to deal with the planet Earth will just basically drop some kind of poison bomb that will kill all life, including this enemy alien race, from the source of the planet, the whole surface of the planet, and that planet's toast. And that's happened to 900 and some worlds so far in this long kind of conflict with this alien race, between the humans and this alien race. Grandma Wanatel doesn't want this to happen, and she's got a plan. This is a very cool story. She has a telepathic link with her kind of a nervous, giant, big, powerful, but a little nervous Triceratops / Brontosaurus kind of looking alien beastie. And he's a fun character. Anyway, she's scoping out Grimp as a possible replacement for her when she decides to retire in the future, because he seems to have a little bit more going on, and a curious mind, and possibly latent telepathic ability that she can work with to recruit to become an agent similar to her, a Terran agent. Anyway, a very, very fun and interesting story. I'm very curious to read more of James A. Schmitz. I've heard good things about him. This is my first encounter with a James Schmitz story and his writing. I really enjoyed it. I'll go through some of the other stories in this collection to kind of tell you what's in there. By the way, The Second Night of Summer, the Schmitz story, was first published in the December 1950 issue of Galaxy Science Fiction, Galaxy magazine. After that, there's a story by L. Sprague de Camp called The Galton Whistle. Then The New Prime by Jack Vance. That Share of Glory by C.M. Kornbluth. The Last Days of Shandakor by Lee Brackett. I have read that story before in the Best of Lee Brackett collection from Ballantine that I have, and that's a kick-ass story. Almost anything by Miss Brackett is worth reading for sure, but I didn't read it in this particular edition. Then we come to Exploration Team by Murray Leinster. Now, I talked about this one, like I mentioned before, in Gareth's video. I toyed with doing a longer version in that and releasing it. I still might. I haven't decided about that one yet. But suffice it to say, that's just a terrific story. If you want to learn more about it, please go watch that other video. But basically, it's about a man named Hewins who's trying to kind of come up with a way to establish an Earth society on this planet called Lorin 2 that's overrun by these nasty kind of crazy kind of raptor type creatures called sphinxes. And to do that, he's got a team of genetically modified, massive and very intelligent Kodiak bears, and also an eagle that work with him. And a man from the survey, kind of colonial survey, comes down by kind of accident, discovers what he's doing there because Hewins is there illegally. Around that time, there's a distress signal coming in from a abandoned colony that had come in before, supposed to be a robot colony. The engineers are sending out an SOS signal, and Hewins and this colonial survey agent and their team of animals trek across the dangerous landscape to rescue those survivors in the other colony, miles and miles, hundreds of miles away. Very cool story. I talked about that in more detail like I said, in that other video. After Exploration Team, there is The Sky People by Poul Anderson. Now, this was published in the March 1959 issue of the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction, and it is another really exciting, kick-ass story. That's kind of the theme of this book, is adventure, 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 Technicolor, widescreen, not just space opera, but any kind of cool scientific idea, but plenty going on, plenty of swift movement in these stories. Things really happen in these stories and they move. Now this one, Sky People, this is not set on another planet or anything. This is set on Earth, thousands of years, I guess, in a post-apocalyptic sort of future, kind of around the Mexican-U.S. border area. And the Sky People of the title are this kind of, they're, I guess, North American looking, Caucasian sort of Viking type, a group of people who hang out in the Grand Canyon. That's where they're based from, and they've discovered after all this time, most of the cultures now kind of repudiate or try to avoid, atomic science or whatever would have caused the post-apocalyptic event, the apocalyptic event that destroyed the previous civilization. But some still embrace science, and apparently these very Viking-like, aggressive, rampaging, rapist, pillager sort of group, the Sky People, have come up with a way to use hydrogen and made these kind of sky blimps, and they parachute down. And anyway, they're coming to attack this city of the Macons. There's a lot of close to the original names, Macons being Mexican, of course. And while they're doing this, as they're getting ready to attack, in the city, there's this giant sailing vessel, and it turns out to be this other group of rather scientific-based island people. Imagine kind of Samoans, or seems like the main guy, his name is Rory. He's the captain of this ship, and he's maybe kind of a Maori from New Zealand, and they're in kind of broker a peace agreement with the Macons, and they're having a big banquet, and Rory is flirting with the beautiful daughter of the alcalde. Her name is Donita Teresa, short for Teresa, I guess. And then that's when the Sky People attack, and there's a long back and forth battle, and the city is being wiped out by these very, they got projectile weapons, guns, pistols. The Sky People do. They're just doing awful things, braining babies, capturing the women to bring them back and become sex slaves or whatever. And they don't expect, though, the skilled warriorship of these islander race of people. This islander race of people led by Rory, he manages to fight his way free and bring a whole bunch of the kind of noble women of the Mexican group, Macon group, to his ship. And then he comes up with a kind of elaborate plan to take out these Sky Peoples. He really hates to run away. He wants to somehow try to rescue this city. And there's a real exciting series of battles that come after that. Now, he happens to be an engineer as well, and so he has a high respect for the Sky People's scientific skills that they're showing. with their development, where the Macons are kind of have gone into a peon class, where the peon class, they're kind of almost sliding backwards into antiquity, going back to more of a feudal system with the rich and then the peons, whereas the Sky People and Riori's own people are more forward thinking. How can we bring the scientific method into, without going into the dangers that caused this, apocalypse in the first place? How can we use it to advance back? And it leads to kind of an interesting ending that you might not expect. But it's a full-on adventure story. It's very, very cool. I really enjoyed that one. I'll just talk about, I didn't read any further than those three and, of course, Exploration Team. But another couple later in this book I have read in the past. So after the Sky People, we have The Man in the Mailbag by Gordon R. Dickson. You'll tell from the laundry list of big science fiction writer names that there's a lot of heavy hitters in this volume. Mother Hitton's Little Kittens by Cordwainer Smith. A Kind of Artistry by Brian W. Aldiss. Gunpowder God by H. Beam Piper. Semley's Necklace by Ursula K. Le Guin. Moon Duel by Fritz Leiber. The Doors of His Face, The Lamps of His Mouth by Roger Zelazny. Now, I have read this one in the past. In fact, I have a chapbook of it here somewhere. But I first read it in this collection, which I've had on my Kindle for years and years now. And the actual physical book of the good old stuff is a little hard to track down. So when you're out there doing your bookstore trawls, used bookstore trawls, keep an eye out for this sucker, the good old stuff, or its sequel, the good new stuff, which is a little more easy to find, I think, online. There's one more story after that Zelazny story, which is absolutely wonderful. Set in a kind of, even though it came out in the 60s, way past the Burroughsian planetary romance kind of vogue at that time. That was kind of out of date, although I suppose there was a nostalgia boom coming in. But it kind of envisions a watery world on Venus. This is past when most scientists would have believed such a thing was possible. But you buy into it with in Zelazny's very capable and poetic hands. It's very cool about a guy who's out to help a former girlfriend land one of these giant prehistoric fish-type creatures called an icky. Very cool and Baroque sort of writing in that story, but very exciting and interesting tale. And then this book concludes with the aforementioned James Tiptree Jr., Dr. Alice Sheldon, writing under the name James Tiptree Jr., and that's Mother in the Sky with Diamonds. Now, that story I haven't read, so there's a lot still in this book I haven't been able to get to yet. It's quite a lengthy book. It's, it's packed full of stories. Like I said, 17 stories, and none of them are particularly short, really. It clocks in at like 450 pages or something. So it's a sizable collection. Anyway, that's all I really have to say now about these stories in the good old stuff, this anthology edited by Gardner Dozois. I highly recommend this book from what I've read of the stories and what I've pieced together from the other stories in the collection, in the anthology that I haven't got to yet. It's a kick-ass, group of stories. If you're looking for classic sci-fi and well written, but in the classic, high adventure mode with lots of imagination on display, can't go wrong with this book. That's pretty much all I have to contribute to Rocket Summer 2026. I hope everyone else that's been taking part in this and reading some vintage science fiction has enjoyed themselves. The month's almost over. So that's all I got for you today. Thanks a bunch for watching. I will talk to you again real soon.